member for Indi.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I would like to support this legislation and take the opportunity to focus my comments on one small section of it dealing with the Farm Household Support Act 2014 and the provision to remove the delegation of the Secretary-General's rulemaking power. So that's really where I want to focus my comments tonight. And just for some background to this, I'd like to quote from the Standing Committee on Regulation and Ordinances in 2014, where it talks about this particular delegation. And in that context, it talks about the role of the Farm Household Support Act as generally treated in the same way as New Start and Youth Allowance. And this means that where there is a reference in the Social Security Act or the Social Security Administrative Act to New Start or Youth Allowance, it is as if there were also a reference to the Farm Household Allowance. And the Farm Household Allowance, the Activity State Supplement and the Farm Financial Assessment Supplement are all treated as if they were Social Security payments. And as a result, the general rules in the Social Security Act and the Social Security Administration Act relating to how to make claims, how payments are made, and the review of decisions apply in relation to payments under the Act. Now, I just wanted to set that out because in my electorate of Indi, we've had enormous problems over summer with the farm household support. And the reasons why we've had problems is because the Farm Household Support Allowance is treated in exactly the same way as Social Security relevant legislation. And I'd like to put to the House tonight and to the government, and in particular to the minister, that it's time we re-looked at this and actually separated out the Farm Household Allowance from the Social Security legislation, because it is causing the government an enormous amount of bad will. It is causing enormous problems for farming families and farming businesses in my electorate, and I think it's going to continue to cause a lot of trouble for the government. So I suspect that it could be easily remedied, and I would encourage the minister in particular to pay some attention to the special needs of farm family businesses when they go through tough times, when they go through drought, and we need access to farm household support. But treating us as if we were Social Security recipients is not the answer. So I just would like to briefly bring to the House the result of some work that the minister actually delegated to the Senator Bridget McKenzie. Over December, she ran a series of roundtable meetings across Victoria, and the report that the minister has sent to my office shows some of the problems that dairy farmers in particular are having with this household support. In the report, they name interaction with Centrelink as being a problem. They talk about the application process of getting FHA. They talk about processing timelines. They're talking about options to deal with crisis situation. They talk about the need for case management. They talk about FHA policy and some of the problems with it. They talk about assistance that it's available and other parts of the FHA system that cause problems. So I'm really calling on the minister to read this report urgently and please to come back to members of parliament who represent large dairy farming communities about what we're going to do about these problems. You've done a great job getting the report. Now I'm calling on you to act on it. And I'd specifically like to focus the problem in telling the story to the House tonight of people in my electorate and how this farm household allowance and the problems with it, because it's being treated like a Social Security legislation, some of the very specific problems that have presented themselves. So these are current problems that have come into my electorate post the round table that Senator McKenzie organised before Christmas. So if I could acknowledge the work of Cindy Lucas, a community person in my electorate, and she, in her own personal capacity, writes that these are some of the problems that that she's been picking up through talking to dairy farmers. That she talked about dairy farmers who have applied more than once, and in fact twice, and they've been declined their application based on the amount of assets that they've got. it's very hard for them to get information on the assets test and the valuations that go with it. In the first application, this particular person was told that after 6 weeks that they were approved. Then a computer glitch led to application being lost. They were then found that the value of their personal shares had increased, which put them over the threshold. They sold shares to reduce their personal debt. They reapplied for the FHA, told in early December that they were being declined due to being over the threshold. But there was a number of errors made during this process: duplicated bank accounts, using bank accounts which have been closed for 15 years, and uncertainty over house valuation. The constituent tells me that they were concerned that the assessments weren't accurate and there was no place to improve it. Her suggestion is that they had a face-to-face meeting with Centrelink staff to actually get it all sorted out. But even though they have been using the RFSC, the Rural Finance Counselling Service, there does appear to be discrepancies in which box details are entered into and where they need to explain the nature of their business. So this particular, it's a third-party story, just shows that there's real problems when we put farmers into the social security system, and we all know what problems social security is having at the moment with resources. But I just wanted to table that as one case that just causes real difficulty to my constituency. But the second letter I want to just briefly talk about is from an accountant in my electorate. He's written to me, and I'd like to read some of the letter into Hansard. Cathy, I've had a long career of over 40 years in the finance profession and currently manage a portfolio of agribusiness clients for a large Australian bank. It is well known that most dairy farmers have been impacted by the terrible actions of the major dairy companies, and these income reductions in the order of 25% for many farmers has resulted in many otherwise viable dairy farms being made financially unviable. In my experience, he says, farmers of all persuasions are generally resilient people who are too proud to put their hands out for government assistance. And I'm aware of several farmers who have reluctantly applied for government financial assistance through Centrelink. And the common response to my question about how these applications are going is it's a waste of time, or bureaucratic nightmare, or service from Centrelink is non-existent. In particular, I know of one family whose application for household assistance had been dragging on since June. So there's a general sense that this is not really working. So in the removal of the delegation, I call on the Secretary from the department to pay particular attention to these cases when social security is being administered and it's causing great distress. Now, as I said before, we know this is not new. We know the minister has his report and it's been delivered to him. So my call is for the urgent action by the minister to actually sort these problems out. Because one of the things that's happened now in the dairy industry in north-east Victoria, we had this round of before Christmas of all these farmers trying to get household support, and we thought we'd got through the bulk of the problem. But what we've found now is over summer, many of the farmers are putting their cows out because they're taking them off. They're dry, so they're putting them onto the back paddocks and they're not actually milking. And if you're not producing milk, you're not getting paid for your milk. So there's another whole band of farmers who are going to experience lack of budget, lack of money coming into their households. So they'll need to apply to Centrelink for this farm household support. So we know that all the problems we experienced before Christmas are going to come back again, and we're going to have another inundation of people coming to my office saying these still haven't been sorted out. So in summary, the application process is confusing, tedious, disjointed and is poorly explained. The amount of documentation that farmers are asked to provide to support their application is exhaustive. There is an apparent lack of proactive follow-up by Centrelink staff, and the applicants seem to be put through often between a number of different Centrelink staff, rather than just one person who is handling it. So that need for case management is absolutely urgent, and it's taking far too long to get results. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'll draw my comments to a close. In terms of this legislation, the changing of powers of delegation I think is welcome, but in doing so I call on the department, I call on the Secretary, I call on the ministers both agricultural and for social security, to get together and to give us the service delivery that we need in a timely fashion, and to provide the resources to the department, and particularly